Good morning. Yesterday morning, I had an interesting experience. I went to visit and pray with an elderly individual that I am very, very close to that is at a time period where life could go either way, has been sick, and we just had a very special time together there with this woman who's very, very precious to me and her daughter. And while there, in visiting them, I shared a story that I felt God wanted me to share with them that we had gone through. And while I was telling them, I actually stood up I was sitting at the table with them. I stood up and was kind of acting out this whole thing and telling this story. And I felt God stirred me inside that was to be on a video for someone. And those of you who have attended our ministry will be familiar, some maybe, with this story, but felt strongly this was for someone this morning. And even though I did a video last evening in our prophecy series on Revelation, I did message number 2 in the Revelation series, but I felt this morning I was to make this, so I'm going to go with it. I'm going to title this short video, Visits from God in the Fire. Visits from God in the Fire. Oftentimes, there's big happenings in our life, big happenings in our walk with God as Christians. And I'm talking to this remnant that I've been preaching to, those who are serious about following the Lord. They're not caught up in the lukewarmness of our world today and the church world of today, but they're following Jesus. They're true followers of Jesus. But oftentimes there'll be big things happen in our life that we just don't understand. And yesterday when I made the video, I talked about the Laodicean church and lukewarmness and how that Jesus challenged the Laodicean church, which we are, I believe, the Laodicean church. He challenged them to buy gold tried in the fire. And I want to kind of tee off of that and tell a story or two of how God has worked in our lives, because there are trying things that come, and he's purifying us, and he's preparing us, and he's getting us ready for tough times. But the point I want to make today is not so much prophetic or from Revelation. I want to talk to you about this principle that often will have something hit us that we do not understand, and it throws us. Just knocks us out of the saddle, so to speak. Often we'll have that. But in the midst of it, God will show up in little ways to assure us he's there. And I think you can relate to that, but I want to just share a couple of cool things that we went through in a message a while back. And I'm not sure the title of the message, it's on YouTube, but I shared about our son's fall off the roof, and how that it was so confusing because it happened on the same date in October that he had been in an automobile accident years and years and years ago. And it just was confusing. It was bizarre. We realized when we got news of the tragic fall from the roof that this was the same date. And we were just really taken back by that. But yet, as we hurried to Texas and went to the ICU unit to see him, we saw that God had gone ahead of us and used a Christian nurse to anoint and pray with him. And that story's on another message, but it helps illustrate the point. And so I want to just kind of kick off with that sometimes there'll be something big happen in our life. Something big happen in our life that just kind of throws us. And what's that about? And is that an attack from the devil? Is that God allowing me to be tested in some way to purify me, like it says there in Revelation chapter 3 to the Laodicean church? Or what? But what's cool about it is, as we stay faithful, stick to it, stay faithful, keep your heart open toward God. Don't get angry and bitter. Anger takes you out. Don't get angry and bitter. Anger takes you out. It takes you out of the Spirit. You don't lose your salvation when you get aggravated, but it takes you out of the Spirit. It takes you out of the sensitivity to the Spirit. And a trick of the devil, I think, in these days when there's so much going on in our world and there's so much stress and difficulty, is to do everything he can to trip us up and cause situations that will make us question and make us struggle. But I want to assure you that God will show up. Stay faithful. God will show up. And Why do we need to get our fingernails into this? Because I think as we move into an uncertain future, like my prophecy series I'm going through right now, I think as we enter into this time period where there's a lot of difficulty and there's a lot going on in our world, I think that we have to get a hold of this truth this morning that I'm sharing. So it's kind of an exit ramp from the prophecy series, but I told you I might do that. But I think it's a needed thing. We've got to get a hold of this. And I believe this is for somebody specific. It's very unusual for me to do a video. Actually, I did 2 videos yesterday. And then this morning, woke up at 1:30 in the morning, couldn't go back to sleep, and just spent time with God and felt stirred to share this. So I believe it is for somebody. But I want to assure you that God will show up. I recently had a situation that just kind of blindsided me and left me feeling bewildered and just kind of demoralized and drained and confused but Lord, I receive this. My steps are ordered of the Lord. God orders our steps as we walk with Him. Remnant, are you listening? He orders our steps. So you allowed this to happen. You allowed this to happen. Even though right now I'm confused and bewildered and a little demoralized, and you allowed this to happen. So help me to stay faithful and listen for any message that's in it and accept any purifying you may be doing or chastising sometimes. But whom He loves, He chastens. So I want to share a quick story. Everyone knows, I think, that watch these videos that in 2005, I had a very, very close call with death and was in the hospital for nearly 5 months with acute myeloid leukemia. Went into the hospital bleeding between my teeth, out my nose. The capillaries were bursting in my body. And they said I wouldn't probably live the first night. And family was all called in, and God touched me marvelously and gave me the passage back in the Old Testament where He said to Hezekiah, I will heal you and add 15 years to your life. And as you know, I have to always stop and give praise for that. I'm in 18 years, so I'm on 3 years of borrowed time. But that was an incredible experience. Why am I saying that? Because that year, many called a Job year, and I wouldn't want to put myself in the category with Job. I am way short of what Job was, but I had a number of people call that my Job year, Job in the Old Testament, and when he went through, because in the same 12 months of the acute myeloid leukemia and near 5 months in the hospital, and an emotional breakdown from all of that, just where I was just, and I won't go into all that, but there was just an emotional breakdown after with the treatments and some of what was done. And I had such strong treatment that they even had to do neurological tests to make sure it wasn't damaging me, and just had a real emotional breakdown after that. But in that same 12-month period, that same year, we lost our home in a fire. And I've talked about that some from time to time, but I want to draw something from it today, and what we're working on is this principle to get across as we enter into a difficult time period. Remnant, as we enter into a difficult time period, we got to get a hold of this, that there'll be things happen that throw you that don't make sense, but God will call you to be faithful despite being confused. You listening? He's calling you to be faithful despite being confused. And then you'll see Him show up even in the little things. So I want to just share a cool story that really illustrates that. We were away on a trip. I had been so sick that winter. God touched me marvelously. I was weak from treatment. I actually chose to take the treatments, even though I knew God had touched me. And I'll not go into that today, but there was a reason for that, so I could identify with people that were suffering. I chose to. And even though I knew God had touched me. And the doctors showed reports that there was no residual cancer cells in my bone marrow or blood. But I chose to take the treatments, and like I said, that's another story. But through that came the writing of the book. So God works in all, and it'd be easy to go off on an exit ramp. There's a message there. But in April of 2006 and May, we began thinking, boy, it'd be nice in the summer. Even though I'm just getting my strength back, it would be nice to take a little trip. So we took a trip on motorcycle, my wife and I, with some friends, and just, I believe it was 3-4 days, if I recall. And this was, we had gotten through the summer, and this was in August that we took the trip. We were coming back, and we kind of got into Indiana. We split and went our different ways. And Pam and I actually went into Logansport, and we were going to meet my oldest son and his wife for dinner. We hadn't been home yet. And we stopped at the park. We were a little early, and we thought, let's just park the motorcycle and just rest in the park. We're an hour early, and then we'll go over to the restaurant. So we were in Logansport, and we were sitting in the park, and we heard a water truck go by, one of those extra water trucks with a siren going, an old-fashioned truck with the big tank on it. And we thought, I wonder where they're going. Well, that went by, and the siren died out, and we went on to the restaurant. We walked into the restaurant. My son, with a very pale look on his face, walked up and said, have you talked to Kevin, our other one of our other 4 sons? And I said, no. Was he trying to get a hold of me? He said, yes, your house is on fire. I said, our house is on fire. And keep in mind, this is the same 12-month period. Some called it the Job year. I don't receive that totally because I'm not on that list with him. But it was an unusual year to go through a near-death experience, near 5 months in the hospital, complete emotional breakdown, get my strength back, and then the house burns down. Sure enough, we got on the motorcycle and headed home. Now, what I didn't know is while we were gone, this was fine. 2 of our sons staying there at the house had the youth group out from the church, and they were riding horses and just having a nice time. And one of the young ladies went into the house and used the bathroom, and there was one of those scented candles, and she had lit that in the bathroom. And I'll just take a second to say they ended up determining that was the cause of the fire because the glass, actually, they say that's often the cause of fire. Those scented candles are often in a glass bowl that's inferior glass, and if it gets too warm, that glass will crack. And it was sitting on the edge of a garden tub in our modular home that we had then, and it caught fire in the bathroom. So the fire was kind of contained for a while. They saw some smoke, opened the door, which they tell you not to do, but I'd have done the same thing probably. And it got oxygen and went crazy. And before the New Waverly Fire Department could get there, boy, the house was all in flames. Now, we, of course, weren't there. We didn't see any of that. They were all outside watching the house burn, waiting on the fire truck. Because, unfortunately, our sons tried to throw some things out the doors to save picture albums and things as the best they could. And that was wonderful. But we're coming home. We're coming in our long lane, and we're on the motorcycle. And we're going up the drive, and all these kids are standing on the side of the lawn. And God said to me as clear as anything, I'm giving you a chance to model how a Christian man reacts that knows the Lord when he loses everything. Whoa. Okay, I'm listening. The Lord said that to me as clear as anything as we came up that driveway and the house was on fire. And of course, the fire trucks were all there then, and the kids were watching it burn. And I'm giving you a chance to model how a Christian man, a man that follows Jesus, a man that claims Christ, how he reacts when he loses everything. Ooh, can I stop here just for a second? Those tests that come along, people are watching us. Those difficulties that come along, they've heard what we say. They've heard us say, oh, I love to serve the Lord. I love to do this. I love to do that. Okay. A lot of times God will test us on our words. Well, you said that, all right? How are you doing with that? Oh, I remember saying, Lord, don't let me flunk the test. And how amazing it was, the grace God gave us. And actually, I had a neat experience with the fire chief that I've shared, I think, in a previous message. But I can't remember his first name. His last name was Minglin. But the fire chief for the New Waverly Fire Department, he came over to me by the tree and he said, are you okay? And I said, yeah. He said, are you sure you're okay? I said, yes. Why? He said, you're the calmest homeowner I've ever seen. And tears came up in my eyes, and I put my arm on his shoulder, and I said, and I didn't know at the time he was a Christian. And I said, you know, I've been through cancer this year and nearly died. And we had a rough year. I spent almost 5 months in the hospital, had a complete breakdown from all of that. There's nobody in that house. They got out, and it's just stuff. And he said, well, I understand that. But he said, I just thought maybe you were in shock. You seemed awful calm. What am I saying to you? Am I glorifying myself? No, not at all. He'll give you grace. Sometimes there's things happen you didn't see coming. You got blindsided. You just felt like your foundations were kicked out from under you, but God will show up. Now, I'm going to continue my story because I'm going to show you just a couple cool things. And there's a whole bunch I could say, but I'm just going to say a few things about this to drive this point home. We had neighbors come down and offer, our wonderful neighbors just to the west of us offered for us to come and stay at their church's parsonage. They didn't have a pastor right then. The house was empty. And that was a wonderful offer. But my oldest son had already offered for us to come stay with him. And so we agreed to do that. So there were a lot of people around pulling in, you know, a lot of commotion. And so when the fire got put out, we went to my son's. I told my wife, I said, tomorrow morning, I want to go back over there. And I want to look around in the ashes and just kind of see if we can't get a grip on this. And so much has happened this year. I just feel, whew, my. And I didn't see this coming. Winter's coming. We've got horses. I need water. The holding tank and utility room burn up. And how am we going to get water to the horses? I'm going to need 55-gallon drums to get horse water. And all that's going through my mind. So the next morning, very early, just after daylight, I drove over by myself, pulled back the lane and parked, and began walking around in the ashes. And I walked into what had been the living room, where a fireplace was. It was a modular home. And sticking up out, now keep in mind, I'm standing in the ashes about knee deep, maybe not quite that deep, but ankle deep anyhow in ashes, and just looking around, just trying to adjust. And I'm saying to the Lord, Lord, help me adjust to this. This is what happened. Help me to accept it and adjust to it. And I looked down, and there was a piece of wood burnt, but sticking up out of the ashes. And I dug around and pulled it up, and it was a picture that a dear friend had given me. And God ordered all that ahead of time. But there was a picture that was burnt around the edges, but it hadn't burned up, and you could see it plain as anything. And it said, "The ways of the Lord are perfect." So we're standing in the ashes of the house, and the little sign picture, plaque, whatever you want to call it, that didn't burn up, I still have it. The ways of the Lord. As for the Lord, his ways are perfect. And I remember holding that picture and saying, Lord, that is unbelievable that didn't burn. Everything else is burned up. You didn't let that burn because you knew this morning that I'd be coming over here. Great is thy faithfulness, God, unto me. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. And I stood there holding that picture. And I said, Lord, help me to not only accept this, but to embrace it. Because you were here ahead of me this morning. You were here when they were putting the water on that fire. And you made sure this didn't burn, so I could find it in the ashes. The ways of the Lord are perfect. You're going to have some things in your life that throw you. You're going to have some things that the devil's going to say, this isn't fair, this isn't fair. You're a child of God. What in the world? This is not fair. All right, I'm not done. And I could go on all day, but I just got 2 or 3 things I feel God should. It actually came from this visit yesterday. I was sharing these stories, and I felt like God said, that's a video for somebody. So I don't know who this is for, but I believe it's for somebody. So I stood there holding that, And I just prayed for a while. And one thing I prayed, I said, Lord, I got to water my horses. I got to get a pump working somehow. The pump's still in the ground. It's submersible, but the holding tank and everything's burned up. I got to get something going here. What do? Should I go get some 55-gallon barrels? These horses need water, and I don't know what to do. We're going into winter here. It's fall. What are we going to do? I need you to, my first need today is I need some water for the horses. I heard a noise and turned shortly after I prayed that prayer. And actually, as I picture that now, I had laid that picture down and I actually knelt down at the edge of the yard when I prayed that. I want to correct that. I prayed the whole time I was there, but so as anybody would be after losing their home. But I just now remembered because when I looked back the lane, I was kneeling and a white truck came up over the hill. And it was a dear friend. It was Eric Allwine. It was a dear friend that came to the church. And I had prayed and asked God, and even said Pam the night before, what are we going to do about water for the horses? But I had knelt and prayed after holding that picture and crying over it. Lord, I need water. You said you'd supply my needs. I need water. The truck came over the hill. The truck parked. Eric got out of it. I walked up to him. He hugged me. He said, I was on the roof of a house this morning working, and God spoke to me and said, Tom Robbins is going to need some help. I've come to help you get your water hooked up. What's the point? Sometimes, remnant, in the Christian walk and following Jesus, there'll be happenings that just kick the foundations out of you. And you can't figure out why. And you feel demoralized, and you feel discouraged, and you just feel shot to pieces. Stay faithful. Stay faithful. They didn't endure the end will be saved. Matthew 24. Stay faithful. He'll start showing up in all kinds of ways. That man went out there, opened the pedestal where the electric came in for that modular hot wired things, ran a couple wires he had in his truck. In about 20 minutes, he had my pump running. And I could shut it on and off without a holding tank and have water pump for my horses. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? Now I'm going to jump ahead, but I got to wind this down. I spoke at a cancer banquet. I was supposed to speak at a banquet in Indianapolis. The doctor made a connection, my one doctor, and I won't go into that, but it was kind of awesome how all that happened. And I was asked to speak at a cancer banquet for relatives of people struggling with cancer and survivors of cancer and tell my story. Well, I almost canceled because of the fire. You know, trying to live out of a suitcase, and my kids were so kind to let us stay with them. So I thought, no, I can't cancel that. I can't cancel that. So I went to the banquet, and I shared about the cancer. And of course, there were oohs and ahs all through the group as I shared about how sick I was and how God had given me the scriptures and how he had touched me. And it was just a moving time at this banquet. But I felt I should go ahead and tell about the fire. So at the end of my speech, I said, I've got a tag on to my speech about the cancer. I know this is a cancer banquet, but we just had an interesting happening, and I told them about the fire. And my, oh my, was there ever a ooh and ah go up in the group. They were like, you got to be kidding me. This happened in the same year? All right. God shows up. When I was done at the banquet, this kind of street-looking gal came up to me. And it was really cool. She just kind of come walking up to me, and just her manner, just kind of a street girl. Of course, we'd worked on the streets, and I was comfortable with that. She walked up, and she walked in, leaned forward, and she pointed at me and waited on me to make eye contact. And when I made eye contact, she said, God's going to give you double for your trouble. God's going to give you double for your trouble. And I laughed for a second, and I actually felt the Holy Spirit said, no, that was my voice. So I'm like, what does that mean? So I thanked her for the encouragement. I had no idea why she said that. Other people were coming up. It just moved along quickly. I drove home alone thinking, what does that mean? Okay. Kind of forgot about all that, got caught up in cleaning up, and somebody helped, and oh, it was wonderful. They loaned me equipment. People jumped in and helped, and we got the mess all cleaned up, and we got permission to rebuild. I was going to be given the money from the insurance company who took very good care of us. God was so good to us. There's so many things I could talk about here. God just gave us favor. I could see it. I could just see it, God giving us favor. But if I wanted to build, I'd done some building with churches and houses in the past, and I wanted to build on the original foundation. My wife and I talked, and we were living in a camper, some wonderful people. The sailors loaned us to stay in, and I drew up some plans to present the insurance company. What if I don't want another modular, but I want to build a house on the original foundation? And they said, that's fine. You can do that if you want. Anyway, long story that I'll shorten. In September, cleaned up. October, we finish up, get all the approvals for everything. Got the okay to build, started Thanksgiving week building. November, December, January, we got that place built and had a family room and a garage that we didn't have before. And did it with the check they gave us for a modular. Didn't have to borrow any extra money. Now, when we got ready to move in, the bank said, you kept your same mortgage and you didn't have to borrow any more money. But for paperwork, we have to do an appraisal. I said, okay. So they came out and did an appraisal. And the amount that the new house appraised for was exactly twice what the other one had appraised for when we had it appraised to get a loan a couple of years before the fire. And when I saw those papers, tears came up in my eyes, and God said, I'm going to give you double for your trouble. Isn't that cool? Now, these stories, what are they saying? I'm trying to drive home a principle that we're entering into a difficult time period. I'm doing a series on prophecy and on Revelation. I'm going to be drawing from the book of Daniel and talking about different things of coming events. As God lays it on my heart, I've already laid out my next message. We'll see when I do it. But we're going to have some trying times. For the Laodicean church, it says in Revelation 3, I counsel you to buy gold from me tried in the fire. We're going to have some trying times that God's going to allow us to go through. I've said something recently to the Lord. I said, Lord, you said the steps of a righteous man are ordered of the Lord. So you let me walk through this. This was a difficult situation, something that happened recently. This was a difficult situation, but you let me walk through that. So I have to believe that you knew that. You allowed it to happen. Stay faithful. Stay faithful. It's okay to say, I don't understand. It's okay to say, this hurts bad. It's okay to say, Lord, just kick me in the gut. It's okay to say that. God's not going to fall off his throne when you're honest with him. But stay true. Don't get angry and bitter. Don't get angry and bitter. Don't get lost in the why forest. You get angry and bitter, you can't walk in the Spirit. He wants to lead you. He wants to do it, but you got yourself out of the pipeline. Are you with me? Yeah. That's why it says be careful lest a root of bitterness spring up, because then that takes you out. That takes you out. And don't get lost in the why forest. Why this? Why that? Why this? Why that? Why this? Why that? You get lost in the why forest, you'll never get out. It's interesting in the love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, where it talks about the wonderful love of God. And we have that, love is patient and kind. That's quoted all over the world, and it's in Hallmark cards and everything else. At the end of the love chapter, a verse that seems almost out of place. It says, and now we see through a dark glass, but then face to face. Isn't it interesting in the love chapter that God told us there's going to be some things we don't understand? The glass is dark and we can't see through it. But he still loves us. Stay true. Stay faithful. He'll show up. He'll show up in little ways. You'll be standing in the ashes and that plaque didn't burn that says the ways of the Lord are perfect. You'll kneel down by the electrical pedestal out in the yard and you'll say, I've got to have some water. And you said you'd supply my needs. And a white truck will come over the hill and in 30 minutes you'll have water. And even though the bigger situation you don't understand, stay true. This is for somebody.